everyone, and welcome back to another live episode of the Riley Hall Show. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Today, we do have some really harrowing stories, so viewer discretion is advised. You know, if you don't want to hear about what's going on in Ukraine and one of the more recent, really devastating stories that's come out of the conflict, then maybe skip ahead to if you're not watching this live, and if you are, then maybe don't watch, because today we are going to be talking about Russian war crimes in Ukraine. That's the first story that we're talking about today. So for those of you who haven't seen what's happened, the Ukrainian president Volodymyr Zelensky has urged the world to recognize Russia's actions, their military operations in a part of Ukraine, in Bucha, as genocide. Now, genocide's a big word, right? And it's a dangerous thing to just throw around when there's little evidence of it. But in this case, there is evidence of really horrific war crimes that are happening. Zelensky said that people have been killed and tortured, with extremities cut off, women raped, children killed. It's genocide. And photos have been released of burial pits with corpses in them, shallow graves where people have just been thrown. And these weren't just Ukrainian soldiers, which would be bad enough. These were Ukrainian civilians. And there's one specific burial pit that was found in a forest near the town of Motsin, which is about 20 miles west of the city of Bucha. And a lot of this, they think, is because of civilians being bombed and civilian homes and things like that being destroyed. But there is also the fact that there's a lot of evidence that Russian soldiers have been just executing Ukrainian civilians. And it's very harrowing. We're not going to show you any images because I don't think you need to see that. They are available online, but I wouldn't recommend looking at them. The mayor of Motsin, her home was raided, and there's some very loud noises happening. She and her husband and son have been found dead. They were bound and showed signs of torture. Obviously, Mayor Sukhenko was the kind of person who the Russian forces would particularly be interested in taking out, because she represented Ukrainian democracy. She represented, home rule or autonomy for Ukraine. So it's extremely harrowing. There's been about 300 people who've been found there who were killed, and there were bodies strewn throughout the streets, some showing signs of being bound and tortured. And it's really, it's unbelievable that human beings could do that to other human beings. It's devastating, and it's incredibly harrowing stuff. But the rest of the world has responded to this. The US has sort of led the charge. Linda Thomas Greenfield, who's the US ambassador to the UN, said that Russia was, quote, subverting every principle we hold dear, end quote. And she urged for Russia to actually be removed from the UN Human Rights Council. That's a big deal. This stuff does not happen lightly. Obviously, Russia has been part of a lot of the most important aspects of the UN for a very long time, since its creation. So this would be a major step and a major shift in the geopolitical landscape. Joe Biden, the US president, has called for Putin to be tried at The Hague. For those who don't know, The Hague is the Dutch city where there's a lot of different international institutions for often for dealing with actions of crimes against humanity and things, such as the International Court of Justice and things like that. So, you know, when Nazi war criminals were tried at The Hague, the war criminals who fought in the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s, some of them were tried at The Hague. You know, there was a lot of different instances where this has been done, and Biden sort of saying that Putin should be tried at The Hague is a pretty big deal. So how has Russia responded to all this? How has Russia decided to come back to maybe justify their actions? Well, they haven't actually owned up to it. They've said that it's all fake. The atrocities are all fake. I think we all know that, yes, obviously, Western sources have been the ones reporting on these atrocities. And yes, the Ukrainian president is the one who's calling it genocide. But it seems very unlikely that there's been all these different Western sources from the United Kingdom, from the US, and other European countries, from Ukraine itself, that have, you know, been on the front lines, that have been reporting these things. And no one has found any evidence that any of this stuff is fake. None of it, right? Of course, in Russia, if you're constantly being bombarded with Russian state media, whether it's on your TV or on your radio or online or whatever, then you're going to believe that because that's all you're getting. But when you can access all these different sources, and pretty much all of them, certainly all the reliable ones, are saying that these atrocities are very much real, it just, I mean, it beggars belief that anyone could believe it, other than people, obviously, who were in Russia being bombarded with nothing but pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian, anti-Western propaganda. So it's an incredibly scary time. It's devastating for the people of Ukraine. It's devastating for the people of Bucha, and all of us at the show and everyone at DJing in general, I'm sure, you know, all our hearts go out to people who've been affected by this, the victims and the victims' loved ones, because these really are. This is an incredibly dark time for the world and for Europe, specifically. So, yeah, we just have to hope and pray that that Russia steps back and stops with these crimes. Of course, other governments should be doing more in the form of economic sanctions and things, but luckily there does seem to be a bit of progress on that front, at least. So on the British front, nothing to do with Ukraine, this next story, but more to do with the abilities of our elected leaders to do their jobs and not be crooks. Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party and leader of the opposition, has said that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, is unfit for office. Now, for those of you who are watching who maybe aren't British, there might be some of you, that's pretty obvious to everyone who knows anything in Britain, that Boris Johnson's not fit to be Prime Minister. And this is just another thing, just another layer to why that's so obvious, right? So the former ethics chief for the government, Helen McNamara, the former ethics chief, she was in charge of making sure things were ethical, has recently been charged a £50 fine and apologised, calling it an error of judgment, because she attended a party breaking lockdown laws in June in 2020. And she apparently brought a karaoke machine. So, you know, clearly Helen knows how to party. But this is just another example of someone in the government who has been involved in breaking of the law and viewing themselves as above the law. And, you know, there's a different set of rules for us, right? There's a different set of rules for those at the top of society than everyone else. Keir Starmer has called on the government to publicly release information detailing exactly who in the government, particularly those in higher positions, have been fined and why. Right? He said that, quote, "The public complied with the rules. They're entitled to know who didn't comply with the rules and what's going on," unquote. And it's worth noting, this isn't just this. Yeah, this is not a one-off thing. More than 100 people, including Boris Johnson himself, the Prime Minister, are being investigated as part of this probe into 12 allegedly illegal events held on government premises during lockdown. 12 different events and 100 or more than 100 people. Now, I mean, that is just, that, I mean, that is mind-boggling that the British government are being investigated on such a massive institutional scale, into literally breaking the law, while so many of our people suffered and stayed at home. You know, some people who really, you know, had trouble with mental health issues. I know a lot of people who struggled in lockdown because of their mental health. And they didn't see people because they knew that it was the right thing to do for public health. They were being a patriotic citizen. And meanwhile, the government was laughing and having a good time and partying. Boris, and obviously Keir Starmer, you know, he has motivations to be saying these things. He's the leader of the Labour Party. He's the leader of the opposition. He wants to be Prime Minister. He doesn't like the Tories. But he's right. He said Boris Johnson oversaw, quote, widespread criminality, and he is just correct. Right? 20 fines have already been issued to people who Boris Johnson was overseeing. People in the government. 20 fines already. 20 instances of law breaking, and there's likely going to be more cases. Right? So obviously, Keir Starmer said that Boris Johnson was unfit for office and that he should resign. And I mean, yeah, fucking hell, obviously. I mean, Jesus, right? And a lot of people have rightly pointed out that Johnson probably misled the House of Commons. It seems very, very likely that he misled the House of Commons when he said last year that rules were always followed at Downing Street, because they clearly weren't, and he was in attendance at some of these parties, so he must have known. Not to mention the fact that there were lots of people there who had a part in implementing those rules, and now we've got the fucking person in charge of making sure the government is ethical admitting that they broke the law. I mean, it's amazing. It's just amazing that anyone can still vote for the Conservatives. Look, I know Labour are far from perfect. I know that, right? But would they go this far? I really don't think so. I really don't think so. And I think it's wild, just to kind of zoom out a bit, that we really, at this point, you know, you say the word politician, people think, you know, a sleazy scumbag. They think someone who's self-serving, someone who's a liar, someone who's a hypocrite, someone who's probably a bit corrupt. Why on earth are we just accepted that that's what politicians are like? These are people who are leading us. They're the ones in charge of all the stuff. They're in charge of everything. That's what they do. And we've just accepted that, oh, well, of course, politicians are going to be liars. They're only going to care about themselves or maybe a few of their ultra-wealthy mates. Yeah, that's just what politicians are like. Yeah, they're going to be involved in a bunch of corruption scandals. Yeah, they're slimy and don't actually care about anyone other than themselves. Yeah, that's just what politicians are like. What? No, we have to, you know, not lose sight of what our political system and our economic system, I suppose, as well, should look like. You know, we should have politicians who are not corrupt. We should have politicians who do not lie, who do not break the law. Politicians who, when they really fuck up badly, or when they do break rules or something, they maybe apologize sincerely once, but strike two and they're out and they resign. In fact, the rules should be strict enough that Boris Johnson can't even be Prime Minister anymore because he clearly broke the rules. And obviously the Met Police have been all over the place with this, really not doing themselves any favours with how horribly they've handled this investigation. So it's been a whole catastrophe, and Keir Starmer is absolutely right that Boris Johnson oversaw widespread criminality. But there are bigger issues in the world, unfortunately, than this. Although, of course, it is partially because of how corrupt governments are, and how selfish politicians are, that we're in this mess. In fact, that's probably the main reason, along with, you know, the large corporations who've been pumping all this CO2 into the atmosphere and stuff. But the The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, has released a new report on Monday detailing the, frankly, fucking catastrophic fate that awaits the world if we don't act strongly enough. And they've also presented some of the solutions to the climate crisis, which is obviously is a good thing. It's very frightening. I mean, it seems like every single year the UN is saying time's running out, but we really have run out of time if we don't act really with massive amounts of investment and completely re-engineer the global economy. And if we don't start now with that level of kind of boldness, we're fucked, basically, right? We're screwed. It's also worth noting that after this came out, in fact, no, the same day that this came out, Jacob Rees-Mogg, prominent Conservative MP and man who looks like he definitely would have owned a child sweatshop in the Victorian era, probably still does. That was a joke, don't sue me. He said that we should drill every last drop of oil in Britain and in the North Sea. So that was cool that he'd say that at the exact same time this came out. But anyway, the co-chair, Jim Skier, said that if we want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius globally, which obviously is still bad, but a lot less catastrophic than what it otherwise would be, because of course the kind of further you go, the more exponentially terrible it is because of how much you destabilize the sort of fine balance that nature has. He said we need immediate deep reduction in CO2 emissions across all sectors, right? Everything that you can think of, whether it's transport or industry or people's homes or healthcare, education, the way that we operate businesses, everything has to fundamentally change. They created, though, a model, the IPCC, so that 43% of greenhouse gases would be cut, 43% of greenhouse gas emissions, I should say, would be cut by 2030. So they're kind of giving us a manual of how to solve this, right? They're showing us, they're showing governments, they're showing corporations, they're showing the general public, but still nowhere near enough is being done. They say that we need to be reaching net zero by at least 2050. Net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Now that's actually pretty easy. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of money is going to have to be spent here, but it would probably be a little more expensive if half the world became uninhabitable and there were like 1 billion climate refugees with nowhere to live. That would probably be a bit more expensive than if we spend a couple of trillion over the next 15, 20 years to decarbonize the economy and improve the environment. So net zero by 2050. Now, ideally, actually, really, I mean, developed countries like the UK, the US, Japan, Germany, France, we could undoubtedly reach net zero by 2035 if we really wanted to. We could. The developing countries, it's a lot harder for them, and I understand that. And obviously China and India produce a lot of the world's emissions now, but historically the West has produced the most. So we do have to take responsibility for that. But we are in a place now where we could do this pretty quickly. But they're saying, look, even if you do it by 2050, it should be okay. But at the end of the day, we are not on track to do that. We're not on track to reach that. Incredibly sad and dangerous. Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General for the UN, pointed out that the current climate pledges around the world will still mean a 45% increase in emissions. That's what I'm saying. We're not actually dealing with the problem, as much as governments like to say these things. And what's ironic as well is that if, say in Britain, for example, right, but this applies to every country on the planet, certainly developed ones, if we rapidly transitioned away from fossil fuels, we invested lots in renewable energy, we made our industries, we could become an industrial power in the world, right? So Tories and people who are more right-wing, who want Britain to be powerful, and people who miss the days when we were an industrial giant and where people would work in factories, there was more of a sense of community, it wasn't just service sector jobs, we used to make things, then let's do it, right? Let's invest in building out loads of our own wind turbines. And when we've built enough of them, we sell them to other countries so they can have renewable energy. We build our own solar panels. We build our own hydroelectric power stations. We build our own geothermal stuff. All of that is going to help us, right? Then there's the fact that if we rewild our green spaces and our natural environments, then the country will become cleaner. The air will be more breathable. If we reduce the amount of pollution coming from our cars and our vehicles, we increase investment in public transport, make sure that all our buses and our cars are electric, invest a lot more in decent railway. Our railways are terrible. And particularly high-speed railways, the air will be so much cleaner, so much more breathable. If we rewild our natural spaces, natural ecosystems will improve. We'll have better natural flood defenses because, you know, the kind of trees that are constantly being cut down help the soil defend against flooding. Right? This is all well-established stuff that you can look at. There's reams and reams of studies about it. And then, you know, it will improve the quality of our water and it will improve the quality of our food. All of this is going to help us out, right? Fundamentally, we're going to be a richer, healthier, more influential country for it. There's very little downside unless you're a fossil fuel executive who loves making loads of money from the exploitation of working class people and destroying the natural world. Those are only really the only people who are going to lose out. So it's about fucking time that we just take action. Yeah, Guterres as it goes on, he says about how we're on a fast track to climate disaster and all that stuff. So we gotta change things as soon as possible. But you guys already knew that, I'm sure. So now it's time for my favorite part of the show, and we actually have a new intro for Hot Take of the Week. So let's have a look.
I've thought deeply about this, and I simply haven't got a clue.
Thank you, Nigel. That was fantastic. So, Hot Take of the Week. I hate to disappoint you all. It's not someone new. It's someone that we've had doing the hot takes before on the show. She and Darren Grimes are, you know, they're neck and neck. They've both been on twice already. J.K. Rowling is the other one. And, of course, it is the one, the only, the lover of Margaret Thatcher, despite the fact that she funneled money to illegal paramilitary death squads in Northern Ireland and destroyed the economy of Britain 3 times, Sophie Corcoran. And she says this: I don't want to hear any government lectures on the environment when we have just littered the country with billions of masks and plastic test strips. So, look, I love that. It's so unbelievably transparent. You know, I like it. I like my grifters to be like straight up con men. You know, I like it when they just in your face, and it's so obvious that they don't really believe at least half of what they're saying, and the other half is uninformed, horrible garbage anyway. This is what I like, right? I don't like it when they kind of dress it all up, right? I much prefer a Stephen Crowder to a Dave Rubin, you know. At least Stephen Crowder admits that he's an evil arsehole and is very upfront about it, whereas Dave Rubin kind of hides it behind all this, you know. Oh, I'm a man of ideas. I think Sophie Corcoran is a perfect example of that. The government doesn't have any right to lecture us on the environment. She's absolutely right about that. But the reason isn't that we've produced plastic waste by testing for a potentially deadly virus and wearing masks to reduce the spread of it. That's not the reason that the government can't lecture us about the environment. The reason they can't is because, well, they don't give a shit about it. And as we just talked about, we're on track to maybe get to net zero 2060, 2070. Our climate targets are terrible. The government also doesn't really give a shit about rewilding, rebuilding Britain's natural spaces, improving biodiversity. It certainly doesn't give a shit about improving recycling. They couldn't give less of a fuck about making sure that the energy companies aren't ripping people off and that we rapidly transition to renewables. They don't care about making Britain an industrial green leader. They don't care about providing lots of high quality unionized green jobs. They don't care about any of that. So yeah, they shouldn't be lecturing us about the environment because fundamentally it's not on us as individuals, right, It's not on us. It's on the gigantic corporations who are destroying the environment and the governments who allow them to do that and fund them half the time. But littering the country with billions of masks and plastic test strips, I think is maybe not quite. I mean, I wouldn't say that the government providing masks and tests to people is bad. The fact that they're now stopping that is actually bad, because, you know, people need to be able to have tests, and masks can help reduce the spread. Obviously, some people need to use it more than others, depending on where they're going and what their work and what their job is. But this obsession on the right with the, like, masks and tests are bad, it's mind-boggling to me. I don't really understand it. And I think perhaps Sophie doesn't either. And that's why it's such a good take, this. It's so fantastic. In a way, it might be the hottest take we've seen yet. Because she's pretending to give a shit about the environment. She obviously doesn't. In fact, she literally just said in a tweet the other day, and you can go and look it up on Twitter. I don't think we have it as a graphic, but the tweet was something about how gas prices getting higher is like a result of the green agenda, right? So she's trying to like kneecap people's support for renewable energy by saying that our reliance on fossil fuels and dodgy fossil fuel companies is and that's obviously harming people, but that's actually because of renewable energy. I don't know, but yeah, so she doesn't care about the environment. That's pretty clear, right? She also hates, like, you know, anything remotely, you know, left wing to do with, you know, like a Green New Deal or something like that. So that kind of doesn't make any sense. And then you've got the anti-masks thing and the anti-test strips thing. Amazing. And then to add it on top of that, it's like, actually, I don't know about you guys, were you littering with your masks and your tests? I know I wasn't. I didn't like just chuck them on the floor. I wasn't just walking around and, you know, throwing them in place. I mean, occasionally I saw one on the floor, because that's bound to happen. Like, a mask will slip out of someone's pocket or something. But, like, is she just admitting that, like, she used to just fucking toss them away because she just didn't care? I just love it. I love it so much. It's such a fantastic take. It is beyond ridiculous, and I think that it's amazing, really. The government can't lecture us about the environment, Sophie. No, you're right. But that's because they are actively allowing fossil fuel companies to destroy the environment and are rejecting calls to improve the quality of life of people in Britain by implementing Green New Deal policies, investing in infrastructure, investing in renewable industry, better jobs, improving the quality of our air, our water, our food. That's kind of that's the problem. Not so much the fact that they gave us a few masks and tests, which apparently everyone was just throwing on the ground.
I've thought deeply about this, and I simply haven't got a clue.
So that was Hot Take of the Week. And that has been the show. It was an emotional roller coaster for sure, but I thank you all for staying tuned. Make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Share it with your friends and your enemies also. That would be really appreciated. We do this live show usually every Tuesday. We couldn't this week, so we're doing it on Wednesday. But make sure to tune in and send to me on Twitter at @Rileyto_Bombito, or at DGN. You could send them potentially any ideas that you might have for the next Hot Take of the Week, because there's so much stupidity and grifting out there, so it'll never end. Thank you all very much for watching. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.